Welcome to the So You're Ready to Date podcast. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Angie. And here's where we talk about all things dating, love, and relationships, and most importantly, having fun.
Join us for practical advice for dating successfully on your terms.
Welcome aboard
and enjoy the ride.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new week and a new episode of So You're Ready to Date. We had a great episode all lined up for you, and Lisa and I got to talking before we even got to prepare for our episode. And we started talking about social awkwardness and social interactions. And this topic came up and we started having this conversation and realized that we should have hit the record button before we even started talking about it. And decided we're just going to continue our conversation here because I think it's an important topic for us to cover. Lisa had just got done saying something very important about how men and women are different in social situations. And we're talking about how sometimes it seems like men get a pass on awkward social interaction and how they get forgiven for not being able to read a room or interpret social interaction in an appropriate way, and the difference between appropriate interaction and just being creepy. And so I think, Lisa, would you maybe repeat what you had said just before you hit the record button? Because I do have some questions about your interpretation of that and kind of what you said. And I think that's a great jumping off point for our episode today.
Well, I said that a lot of men get this pass about having to learn how to read a room or learn how to do these interactions because it's never affected their personal safety. I think many people who, especially if you identify as a woman, if you've been socialized and raised as a woman, very early on, you are told that you have to be scanning the room. You have to be checking out who's coming in, who's going, and how you interact with people because it has a very real effect on our safety. Who I say no to in this particular way may be the person who is sitting out in their car waiting for me to leave the bar, the grocery store, the gym, anywhere to say, hey, I liked you. I think you're cute. I think you need to go out with me, and not learn to take no for an answer. So there's a very real aspect of, yes, I have to learn, how do I say no to this person? It's never going to be the right way. I think we're seeing too much and too often on social media that there is no good way for a woman to say no. It invariably gets us in trouble a vast majority of the time. So we have learned how to gauge how safe or unsafe something is, or how to react or how to act in a social situation, because it has very real consequences for us. And until I think men have that same level of, if I say no to this woman in this particular way, she's going to hit me with a car, she's going to rape me, she's going to do a whole bunch of other things to me. They may not get it in the same way that we do. I'm not saying that women don't do this, because I know that there are definitely instances that it happens, but the prevalence is way more for us to have to learn how to not be necessarily socially awkward, how to interact in a certain way. And the tide is turning, and it's a good thing, because I think we both, male, female, non-binary, whoever you are, need to be able to have respectful interactions with the people we meet on a day-to-day basis. But I think it's time we stop giving men this free excuse of, well, they're just awkward, or they just don't know, or no, we all need to learn how to interact socially. We all need to learn how to accept rejection gracefully. And it just fires me up in a way. I don't know why. Probably because I've had too many interactions where it just didn't go well, or I just didn't feel comfortable, that if I have to learn this, it's not fair that you don't have to learn this too. I think that's where it's coming from. Like, you can Google this just as much as anybody else, but you put out this, well, I don't know, you can know how to do this. Everybody should know how to do this.
I'm going to put out a disclaimer right here in this episode. This episode is, all of our episodes are opinions follow our advice, don't follow our advice. We are not giving you professional advice. We are not telling you that you should or shouldn't do anything. You are the master of your own life. Follow what you will or what you won't. These are only our opinions. We are stating our opinions, our experiences, and talking from our own lens. And so that's all this is. But I do think that more than most, this is going to be a highly opinionated episode. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. And from that perspective, Lisa, I do hear that you're feeling very strongly about this when you say that. So talk to me just a little bit about how you see or what you see changing, or how you see that can be changed when you say something like that. Because as I was talking about a friend of mine that is highly socially awkward or can almost border on creepy, and that is something that I have more than one male friend that borders on that. And I won't say that they're close male friends, maybe more acquaintances, but people that socialize in my life that come to me for questions of how do I handle this? How do I handle that? And in that context, I would say that they are trying to learn, trying to do better, trying to be better, but they are still socially awkward. And in my experience, in the way that I do that is they are men and they are socially awkward, and my interactions with them, they are socially awkward. And so I give them the pass, but I also recognize that they're coming to me for that advice so that they can do better and be better. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a great opportunity that if they're asking for the advice, but at a certain point, you'd be like, I have told you this. You either implement it or don't, but you don't get to keep coming back to the well, right? I've given you the water. I've given you the cup to drink in. You need to do something with it, right? You can't lead a horse to water and make it drink. I can only keep telling you this so many times. At a certain point, we're all accountable for what we do with either the advice we've asked for, the help we've asked for. I'm all for helping people learn and grow, but I can't force you to implement it, right? So I can give you this advice. At a certain point, the advice stops, because obviously if I still have to keep helping you with this thing, it's not sinking in and you're not turning around and making it a part of your life. You know, I know a lot of people who are on the autism spectrum have a hard time just reading social cues and things like that. I'm not saying that there's never a reason to be kind and gentle and accommodating to people, but within a certain realm of, okay, I will accommodate you to a point, but after that, where's your personal responsibility in this? I think that's sometimes where it comes in for me, is that I'm not going to hold your hand all the time. I'm willing to help and kind of guide you into a certain point, but at what point do you pick up the baton? Do you pick up the Google or the book or whatever it is and start figuring it out for yourself? You see this a lot when people are talking. This is a small little tangent, I promise. When people are talking about anti-racism work. As a white woman, Black and Indigenous and people of color can only do so much to educate me. At some point, I have to take that on myself. And I think for men, it's starting to pick up. You're seeing this tide of women who are staying single and child-free, and who are seeing that marriage is not the benefit to them that it is to men. So for me, it's an accountability aspect. I'm willing to help to a point, but I need you to start taking accountability for how you implement it, for how you change, and for how you call out your buddy at the bar. It's great that you're doing the work, but are you calling out that creepy friend of yours who is making unwarranted passes to the girls who are just trying to have a girls' night? Are you saying something when somebody makes an inappropriate work joke at work? It's men who need to call out other men, right? It's men who need to help other men sometimes do this as well. And so that was a long-winded way to say, you just need to take accountability to how you implement that and how you, going forward, make those changes.
Do you think that people who are socially awkward, socially inept, and currently unable to read social cues are aware of their inabilities or their lack of social awareness?
How can you not be? You may not necessarily interpret that as I'm being socially awkward. But at some point, you're like, but nobody ever wants to have a conversation with me, or I can't hold friendships, right? So I think because I would always kind of classify myself as a little bit socially awkward. I think I was way more awkward in like my 20s and 30s, but I had to do a lot of work to practice reading cues, figuring it out for myself. So I think on some level, you understand that something's not right, that you see maybe friends or siblings or somebody else seem to have really easy interpersonal interactions. And for whatever reason, you feel like, how come when I do X, Y, or Z thing, just like so and so does, I don't have the same result? So I don't know if maybe you can put a finger on it if you feel like you're socially awkward, but I think you can feel one of these things is not like the other, where you know that there is something that just doesn't feel the same like everybody else does, but maybe you just don't know the language for it. I think we talked about it some in season 5 when we were talking about narcissism, where sometimes we need to have the language before we're able to really maybe ask better for what we need. If we don't know exactly how to put into words why we feel like our interactions don't go the way we want to, why we can't keep relationships or friendships, or everything just feels not easy or not right, that maybe it's about looking into how do I find the language to better describe why it seems like when I talk to the girl at the bar, I'm giving off creepy vibes as opposed to just awkward vibes.
Personally, I think some of that is a lack of self-awareness. And I think some of that is innate. And maybe this is letting people escape responsibilities. But it is a scientific fact that men's brains and women's brains work differently. And men, they're wired differently. And women are wired to connect to their emotional side more easily, as a general rule, than men, who are wired to connect more easily to their logical brain, right? Masculine versus feminine energy. We all have both. We can all go back and forth. But I think being self-aware is much more of a female trait than it is a male trait. And so I think sometimes we as women are taught to read a room for safety reasons and other reasons, but I also think that there's some science behind why men are less self-aware than women and why men give off some of those creepy vibes. So while personal responsibility is some of that, and they do have to take some of that, I also think that it may be more challenging than that, because I think that there's some science behind it, in the fact that they have a harder time becoming that self-aware and connecting to that part of themselves, or even being able to socialize the same way that women do. Because women, even back, if you go way back in caveman days, and women socialized in groups in order to create the village and to make the village run. So I think it goes back even that far to how women socialize versus how men socialize, and why sometimes men are socially awkward versus women. And I think that there's some evolutionary changes that are happening more slowly than we would like to see. And I think that plays a part into some of this as well.
Yeah, I could see that. But I would also push back too. Is like, are we any more self-aware, or is that considered feminine and men don't want to do that because it's feminine? Right. So it's like that socialization, I think, is a very real key piece of it. Of, are they less self-aware? I think that could be a possibility. But if that's considered a feminine trait, and part of masculinity is not to be feminine, it's easy to not want to do that particular thing, because as a man, and to be in that masculine space, you can't do anything that's seen as feminine or weak or womanly. So I feel like the tide is turning a little bit, because it's been, like you said, generation after generation after generation of how many times have boys don't cry been probably repeated ad nauseum to many men in our lives. And that's not something that's going away anytime soon. It's starting to change, when those key pieces of how we socialize both boys and girls, until that stuff starts to change, it'll be a lot longer to get to this space where self-awareness is seen as a trait in people as opposed to male or female. And that self-awareness is something that we all should want to have. I think that's what's kind of helped me grow in the ways that I needed to, was to cultivate this self-awareness and to come at this from a space of it's not good or bad. This is not about trying to bash men or to praise women. It's not about lifting one up and crushing the other. It's about noticing that we have these very real gaps and kind of chasms between us. And how do we start to build a bridge to bring us closer together so that we can have conversations that are respectful and so that we can help teach each other, some of the skills that men have that are helpful to women, some of the skills that women have that can be helpful to men, and about how do we start to make this something that is a human trait as opposed to this is only a girl thing and I don't do girl things, and making it more universal and something that's seen as healthy and necessary as opposed to something that makes you weak because you're aware of what's going on.
And absolutely. And again, everybody has the masculine and the feminine energy, right? We both parties have that, and we both need to tap into our masculine and feminine energy for different things. And we both utilize the fuel of that. It's just when I was thinking about that, and from what I have studied in the past through the coaching and through the relationship studies that I've done, it's talking about how the male brain has developed versus the female brain. So you're right. It's not about right and wrong. And it is about everybody developing that self-awareness. It's just kind of about where men are currently falling on that spectrum and the expectation of where they should be versus where they are versus where we're allowing them to be, and meeting them with where they are and having an expectation that allows them to continue to grow, but not holding the fact that they are where they are against them in the meantime.
Right. Because we've all
anybody, men or women. This has nothing to do with men or women. This is anybody that is socially awkward or creepy in a social situation.
Well, I think anybody who's been on any sort of healing journey has that smug period, right? Where you're like, I'm learning all of these healing techniques and I've done all this shadow work. And it's inevitable at some point that it comes off as I'm better than you. And if you would just do this, oh my gosh, this is going to totally change your life. Everybody has done this at some point in their journey. I guarantee it, because I have done it myself, where you feel so like alive with all of this new knowledge and it's so awesome. And you just want everybody to jump on board and just be with this thing. But it is sometimes about realizing that everybody has to be a beginner at some point. And then, it was really hard when I first started coaching clients, was remembering that when you're a beginner, you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes you have to go back in that mindset of like, oh, okay, when I first started deconstructing some of this stuff, when I first started really working on being less awkward or trying to talk to new people or putting myself in new situations, how did that feel? And to go back to that beginner's mindset, to go back to that space of, okay, I can have empathy for you because you're starting this journey. At a certain point, you can start talking about expectations if it's like in some sort of interpersonal relationship, but always having that compassion for people when they're starting and they're trying and they're going to mess up, because remember, you messed up. And to come to this space of, okay, here's where you are. Where do you want to be? And I think sometimes we forget that step too of like, oh, what do I want my end goal to be? That's again a key part of, I think, that awareness. End goal is kind of a misnomer, but it's okay, what am I shooting for? What am I aiming for? There's a reason I want to do this journey. There's a reason I want to do this thing. What am I hoping to get out of this? Maybe the disservice we're doing when we are helping people who feel socially awkward is we help them with one particular situation. What maybe we need to have a bigger picture view of what they're doing. And maybe that changes how we interact. I don't know.
But I also feel your point of coming back to the well over and over and over again, because when I don't mind dispensing different advice and I don't mind giving encouragement if somebody comes back and says, okay, I remember what you said and you said to do this and I'm having a really hard time with this. Can you give me some encouragement? Can you give me some tips on how to do this? Can you help me implement what you told me to do? That is very different than coming to me with the same problem over and over and over again, and me telling you, I already told you. I already told you. Here's the same advice. Here's the same advice. Those are two very different things, and those are two very different sets of energy. And I am all about helping you help yourself. And as long as you have a vested interest in becoming better and being better, then yes, I am here to support and be a cheerleader. And I will happily give you any knowledge that is in my head. I will give you the support that you need as long as you are taking that step to be better. But when you're not willing to make any changes, not willing to be coached, not willing to take those steps, but you're still coming to me for that advice, then, you know, at some point I have to cut you off from my energy, because that isn't healthy for me in that situation. And I have to let you go be socially awkward all by yourself.
Well, and I think maybe a component of this is like, if you are truly interested in being less socially awkward and you have that person who's willing to help you, then as much as I hate this, is that role play aspect of it. I hated that when I had to do it in like work things, but I think that's a really good tool for you to practice. Is this a cheesy pickup line and kind of cute and would get me a giggle, or is that just creepy? I think there's some play that can happen that can really help you see, oh, in my head it sounded like this. When I said it, it did not sound like that. So, you know, if you have those people in your life that you can trust and who have maybe given you advice and you want to implement it, because I think that's the key, right? There's only so many times I can keep giving you the same advice and you not doing anything about it, where it feels like, okay, I'm talking to the wall here. They're listening better than you are. But asking those other people for ways that you can practice and work on it, because like any other skill, any other trait, it's going to take some time. And to feel like you're never going to be awkward, that's, I don't think, ever a goal, because we all end up in those situations where we feel awkward. But maybe it's about trying to find communities who have similar likes, who have maybe some of that awkwardness too, so that you can work on practicing social situations in a space that feels safer than trying to ask somebody out at the bar or when you're at work. Because this is not just for dating and relationships, this is business stuff too. It can happen just as easily inside a business meeting as it can when you're out at the farmer's market trying to hit on the girl who's selling corn, whatever it might be. So it's about finding those situations where you can practice, because that's what I had to do. I hate public speaking. I'm way better at it, and I actually kind of enjoy it in the right atmosphere. But it was something that I had to practice. I had to constantly put myself in those situations where I had to either think on my feet, or I had to give these mini presentations, or I had to talk to new people. And each time, yes, I still got that funny feeling in my stomach. My palms got sweaty. My face got beet red. But each time it was a little bit less. And each time it was, this is not going to kill me. It's only going to make me better. And each time it was that much better, to the point where I feel like I can easily talk to anybody or give a speech about just about anything if I had to. But I had to practice that, and I had to keep getting uncomfortable in order to build that. And I think that's something that you're going to be uncomfortable, and we can't avoid that emotion forever. So if you're okay with it and you really want to change, you have to find those places where you're going to get uncomfortable.
Do you feel like this is public speaking or giving a presentation when you get up here and do the podcast?
No, I never do, because I feel like it's just you and me having a conversation. And while Yeah, I honestly just feel like it's just two girlfriends having a talk and we just happen to invite everybody else to join us.
Yeah, I like that. Me too. I was just wondering because it's one of those things where it does kind of feel like I'm sometimes working on presentation skills, but then other times it feels like we're just having a conversation. And then sometimes we have guests come in. And so there's a lot of different dynamics to it. So I was just kind of wondering if it felt like that helped with anything, or if you felt like you were giving a presentation when we jump on here and talk to the world.
Well, I think for us, it's like the best of both worlds, where it's like days like today, it feels very extemporaneous. Pull out an old speech class term, where you like just kind of show up and talk. And then when we have guests on and when we do certain particular topics, you and I have done some research. We've prepared some questions, we've done due diligence. So I think, again, it's about practicing all of the skills. Not everything is going to be okay, talk for 20 minutes about this particular topic. Or, if you do like a TED talk, you have to be very prepared for those type of things. So finding all of those variety of situations will only help in the long run, because then, because I'm a classic overthinker, I'm going to probably plan out every worst case scenario before I do the thing. Have any of the worst case scenarios ever happened? I can't even imagine that one of them have. So, but it's kind of what helps me prepare. If I can think about it, can feel like I'm prepared. Sometimes it helps me take action. Sometimes it doesn't. I'm working on it. But letting yourself lean into what you think might be faults, might be hidden strengths. So it's always a crapshoot, but you got to let yourself practice and you got to let yourself fail. Failure is not about you being a bad or a good person. It's sometimes just about gathering information. And the more information you have, especially if you're very logical and you're very like, I just need the different steps, then thinking of it as information and be like, okay, so this, and this didn't work. How do I adjust this for next time so that maybe I get a different, more welcome outcome?
That's so interesting that you say, as you talk about being a classic overthinker, I do find that just fascinating, because I think if I sat there and overthought and did all of that, I probably would never take action on anything. Whereas I make a decision and I say, I'm going to go do this. And suddenly I've got, not with me because I'm traveling, but I've got the podcast microphone in my cart, and I've got the airline ticket bought, and I've got the website purchased, and I've got the sword fighting equipment already delivered to my front door. Whatever it is that I'm going to go do, I've already got all of the things before I've even made the decision or researched how to start. Because if I don't take that action and I start thinking through all the scenarios, I'll get into this whole analysis paralysis thing. So I am definitely a take action before I've even thought it all the way through, or I won't do it. So I think it's just interesting that you can go both directions, and you can both fail forward and you can both end up at the same place. Now, I will admit that sometimes I spend way more money on stuff than I actually need to spend, because I jump in before I've done my research to do it the most economical way. But I have also gotten 10 times further down the road than I would have if I had researched it all and then decided not to start, because I've gotten into this whole analysis paralysis thing. So, take it for what it's worth, because I can always make more money, I guess.
Well, I think it's one of those things where I've had to, this is where that self-awareness key comes back in. I've had to double check in and being like, okay, is this need to dive down this research hole, this need to learn all of this stuff because I need to know this, or because I'm afraid to take action? Yes, there have been times where the need to take one more certification or do one more little Google search or do one more thing has been about fear and not wanting to take this step. So sometimes I'm learning that I just have to leap and hope and trust that the step is there. And it's usually there. It's maybe not the step I was expecting, but sometimes it is. That's why that awareness is so important to figure out, is this research necessary to make the best step forward? Or is this me just about me delaying what I know I really need to do? I'm just afraid to do.
Yeah. And I like that too. We've talked about that before, where we've done okay, that feels really uncomfortable. So that means I probably should go do something about that. And I probably need to take a class, or I probably need to hit yes on that and just go do it. Right. I'm the same way with that. So yeah, I understand.
It's like that at some point you will get me into an improv class. I don't know when that's going to be, but every time you ask, I say no. But someday I'm sure you will eventually get me into that improv class.
Going back to awkward social interaction, if you really want to understand how to interact better, go take improv and learn the yes and technique. And then you will be much better at social interaction, because you will understand how to keep conversations going and how to improvise and have these conversations that are not quite as awkward. Or maybe they are more awkward, but they're funny because you're taking an improv class.
Right. So you're shaking off the cobwebs, you're trying something new. Again, fail forward, fail back, you learn something, right? So we want to know all of your best awkward social interaction stories, your best tips or tricks, or if something sparked in you as you heard this episode and you're like, ooh, we want to hear more on this, you're going to email us at soyoureadytodate@gmail.com. If you've got other questions, concerns, topics you want us to talk about, email them to us. The link is always in the show notes, so you can pop in over there. You can follow us on Instagram. Those links are in the show notes as well. Hit all of the buttons so that people know where to find us or to share us. Post about us on social media. We always love for you to share us with other people, because your recommendation probably means more to that person than us just saying you should listen to us, because hopefully they trust you.
And we love you all, and we will see you next week.